Hello, everyone. Happy Veterans Day. A great thank you to all the veterans out there, and also in remembrance of my grandfather who died about a year ago at the age of 98. I looked up to him very deeply. He was a very good person with a strong character and but a kind heart. He was a strong man with a good heart, and he was a good influence on me growing up. I spent a lot of time with him when my mom divorced and she was at work, and he played a huge role in my life. He spent all 5 years in the Second World War in key battles, such as participating in key battles such as the siege of Leningrad, as well as the main battle of Berlin towards the end of the war. He was in artillery, and he wrote a book that actually sold in Russia. It was only it was only in Russian. It wasn't published in any other language. So, just a token of gratitude to my grandfather, who I know can hear me, because the veil between our worlds is much thinner than you think, which is what I saw in my profound dream last night on this interesting 11/11/22 date numerologically. Before I get into that, it is also the date that the Anthem Memorial in Phoenix, Arizona, whose concentric circles are built in stone that align with the sun at a perfect angle, eh, only once a year on Veterans Day, the sun shines through the holes, and there's an image on the ground of an eagle that shines through the holes. If you don't know about the Anthem Memorial, I highly recommend you look it up. It has a lot of esoteric sort of affiliations to it, and it's a very interesting memorial. Having lived relatively close to Phoenix, I have never been there because it was just built recently, and I lived there many years ago. So, basically, the pod's vision to a certain degree has turned into a dream in a subtle way. I came, I suddenly found myself in New York City, and I'm walking around, and everything felt frozen. There was no movement of any kind. So, to give a comparison, when I was in San Francisco, in post apocalyptic San Francisco, it was still full of life in the sense that there was animals and nature that were taking over the ruins of the city. This was nothing like that. The closest comparison I could make was with my near death experience when I entered the highest heaven, or whatever it was. I experienced what I call the absolute 0 point of absolute timelessness. I felt like I was in New York City in a state of absolute timelessness. And in there was no movement. There was no birds. There was no squirrels. There was no wind. It was dead, deathly silent. And I was exactly in Times Square. I was in Times Square, a place that I actually have spent a lot of time in when I lived in New York. And I've given the thought of the actual name of the place squared time. Squared time. So it is in a sense, what comes to mind when you first picture that? What comes to mind is time convoluted, time distorted, time put in a box, time squared, Saturn's cube, the Chronos, the cube of time, entrapment. And that's why I believe I was in Times Square. And there was a massive crack, like a lightning bolt strike. That, for those of you who have seen the place, there's Broadway that kind of veers off to a fork that veers off in two directions. And there's a central building filled with TVs and shit. There was a crack down the middle of that building. Obviously, nothing was on. There was no ads. There was no lights. And there was no people. I'm walking around in a state of confusion. I find myself finally finding people. And they're approaching me, and I'm approaching them. And we're asking each other what took place. And none of us knew. We all knew that something, that we're like in some kind of distortion. And we're walking around, so we decide to go inside some of the buildings. And I go inside a building, I go inside an apartment, and there were people there. There were people in their homes, and they were frozen. They were frozen in place in a state of suspended animation. And so, as I'm looking at them, I noticed I used to live with my stepmom and my stepsister, brother, and I saw them in a dream. They were also frozen. So as we were walking around attempting to figure out what is taking place, there was a veil. We were kind of transitioning dimensions. So I would see this like electrical cloud just as I'm normally walking around, and I would suddenly find myself in an ethereal realm. And in this realm, there was nothing but, it was sort of featureless. It had no spatial dimensions, but there were all these statues there. Statues, magnificent statues made out of marble, made out of all kinds of rock. And they look like gods. So I saw something that would resemble Apollo, Venus, Zeus, Mars, things like that. And I also saw the gargoyle from iPad Go 2. The gargoyle that's in the Denver airport that's now sitting there mocking people as they walk by about the Denver airport murals. Because it's all just a mockery, isn't it? And they started talking. The statues came to life. I don't recollect much of the conversations that took place, but I do remember a few very key important points. So I remember Zeus, or something that looked like Zeus, saying that they are the gods. And then a gargoyle said that we are harvesting dreams. We are the gods. We are harvesting dreams. Weird. But that's not it. Then I find myself in the laboratory again. And the people that were in the pods are sort of doing their Simon Says nonsense again. Except this time it was different. So there were probably 200, 300 people in this one room standing in formation. And this time, they weren't like in a state of sleepwalking or hypnosis. They were actually very lucid and awake. But they were overjoyed and happy to see their scientist person. So they were looking at him with great joy, like they had the eyes of someone who was stuck in a Stockholm syndrome, which they were. They loved their torturer. And he proceeded to, by the way, this entire time, I cannot see the scientist's face. I've never seen his face. Every time in my visions that I would approach him or I was near him, I was not able to see what he looked like. All I saw was a lab coat. And I see him on the stage, and I see him, but he's kind of blurred out. And behind him is this giant screen. And the giant screen is showing New York. And the people from the pods are looking at New York with some kind of strange look on their face, like this sort of excitement, or like they're about to do something, like they're about to enter this place, or I don't really know what the plan was, but he was kind of standing there explaining what's going on, what's going to happen next, and I have no recollection of what was actually said to the people, the clones, the twins, whatever it may be. So I find myself continuously lurking around the city, unable to fully formulate what exactly is taking place. But I do know one thing for certain: the time standing still. And immediately when I woke up, the first thing that came to mind was iPad Go 2. So the clock tower is frozen at midnight. So there's a billion interpretations of this damn wicked cartoon of a curse that never seems to let people go. So if it's not a literal event in the sense, I'm meaning physically in the sense of a tsunami or a freeze over like the Day After Tomorrow movie, comet, what have you. What if it's an opening? The lightning strikes the clock tower. Time freezes. The underworld opens. Everything is frozen and stands still until the harvest can begin. That is a possible interpretation here. So take it however you want. I just thought it was an interesting time, 11/11, to have such a dream. And very fascinating to me, the meaning behind harvesting dreams. Are they harvesting dreams for what reason? To create realities, to distort time and keep it cubed, to put these realities into cubes, so that they can continuously cycle in a loop. A snake eating its own tail. It creates a momentum, a velocity that continues their project, right? If it's true at all. I don't know. By default, it can be and should be, because everything that can exist does exist in some form in the omniverse, because creation is eternal, always was, and always will be. So, let me know what you think.